Welcome back, everybody. In this episode, Mo and I sit down with Katherine Boyle, aka the Lieutenant's daughter. Katherine Boyle is an advocate and speaker for law enforcement kids and families. As the daughter of a Philadelphia Police Department lieutenant, she brings a personal and deeply informed perspective to the unique challenges faced by law enforcement households. Through her work with Beyond the Uniform, Katherine helps families build stronger bonds and stay connected despite the demands of the job. She is especially passionate about giving voice to the often overlooked experiences of law enforcement children so these kids can grow up with security, understanding, and lasting memories that they will pass on to future generations. Katherine has been featured in Law Enforcement Today and is the host of a dedicated podcast, Beyond the Uniform, with the LT's daughter, and partners with departments and organizations to help lead engaging, impactful trainings and events. Her mission is to raise awareness of how the job affects officers' children, advocate for their well-being, and equip departments and families with tools to strengthen relationships that will allow them to be more present and effective on the job and that will last long after retirement. All of the links so that you can reach out to her and follow her work will be in the description below. I hope you enjoy. All right, everybody. I am happy to be back, and we have a great guest with a unique perspective, Katherine Boyle, aka the Lieutenant's daughter.
Yes.
And I was referred to Katherine from Jason and dug into a little bit of what she does and her backstory, as any good cop will do, right? What do we got going on here? And I will say, also teasing a little bit, I also did her podcast, but she has a unique perspective regarding she grew up in a law enforcement home, and a lot of cops know, cops' kids, it's almost like preacher's kids kind of a thing. It's like, you never know. It's a crapshoot what you're going to get, the trauma, all those things. And she doesn't remember it that way or perceive it that way. And which has led her to then reach out and podcast. She's an author, public speaker. She also does training with law enforcement professionals to help them navigate policing and parenthood and how that can affect their children. And it's just it's a refreshing perspective, Katherine. I think I told you this on your show because it made me feel not as bad, maybe, because I do still have a little guilt just in some of the things that I thought. But talking with you was excellent. And I'm very happy that you're on our show. So I really appreciate your time.
Appreciate that. I appreciate that intro. And yeah, I really, really appreciate that. And that's what I hope to be, is offering a refreshing perspective and maybe some hope for families out there.
Absolutely. Well, we'd like to start off with can you give us a little bit where you grew up, how you grew up, and it's with the understanding that we're just trying to what kind of led you into what you're doing today.
Yes. So who knew I would end up here? Honestly, this was the biggest left turn of my life. I grew up in Philadelphia, but I moved to New York City when I was in college to pursue a career in fashion. So I lived in New York for about 13 years, and I worked in the fashion industry during that time. And it was a great career. I had a great time doing it. It was a lot of fun. But when 2020 happened, I had a lot of people kind of reaching out to me, a lot of my friends, a lot of my loved ones in New York who were participating in the riots. And they were challenging me personally, and they were asking me to explain the actions of every police officer across the country, more or less. And because I had a dad who was 10 years retired in law enforcement, somehow I held all the answers, or at least they expected me to.
Yeah.
And it was really tough. It was really eye-opening. It was really jarring because I lived kind of a sheltered life. I didn't know that there was any sort of community out there. Like I always say, the term ACAB was brand new information for me. So I was really kind of blindsided across the board. Not only was this a thing, but a lot of my close loved ones were actively participating in it and kind of dragging me into it, sending me photos and videos from the protests. And it was kind of a tough pickle that I was in, because they were, complaining about the cop that was standing in front of them telling to go home because they were out past curfew. And I was saying, well, that cop has probably been working for 72 hours, is experiencing God knows what, and would do anything to go home. And when they do go home, they're going to have to figure out how to put their kids to bed and read them a bedtime story. It's not making sense to me. Yeah. And I couldn't see how they couldn't see that. And so, long story short, I was just thinking I have to do something as a civilian. I really felt called to speak up and let cops know that there was at least one civilian here who was supporting them. Uh-huh. And That's when I started kind of going down this rabbit hole and interviewing police officers to see what that could look like from, again, a civilian with a background in fashion. Like, I had no idea where to start.
Perfect.
Exactly. Like, the dots were not connecting. But what kept coming up in these conversations was the fact that my dad was a police officer and that I spoke so highly of him and my relationship with him. And it kept coming up over and over again that they couldn't say the same things about their own kids or their relationship with their own kids, or, they were reflecting that their kids didn't talk to them anymore, or they didn't have a relationship with them, or they were trying to actively repair that relationship. And it was really, again, blindsided all over again, because I never thought twice about the fact that my dad happened to be a cop. And now come to find that positive relationships between cops and kids don't always happen. Who knew?
Yeah.
And so that's when I decided to kind of start going down that route of sharing this awareness of, like, your kids are having their own experience with your job, whether you realize it or not. And the sooner you get ahead of that, the better. Because if you realize when they're 15, 16 and they're lashing out, the damage is done and now you're going to have to repair it. So I want to get ahead of that and, share about my experience. And like you said, Tyler, my positive experience and what is possible, even though it can feel kind of difficult in this industry.
For sure. And I want to touch on something because it's something that you just reminded me. Both of my children, when they were in high school, mostly, because COVID was, I think my son was in ninth grade and my daughter was still in middle school, but it was around that time. And then the foreseeable few years after that, they would call me and start asking me questions and stuff because they were defending law enforcement writ large. And it was getting into which is wild to me. These are, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old kids at age bracket, and they're getting to like the nuances of law enforcement, and anything negative, my kids would immediately react to be like, no, I know because my dad and do you know who they would get very defensive. Even sometimes when they didn't really understand what they were arguing for, they just were like, no, my dad's a cop. Cops are good. This is what's going on. It led to actually a lot of other conversations, and I had to kind of explain what was kind of going on. But anyway, so you were in an older age bracket than they were at that time, and you also found yourself doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a wild thing. It's like you're shouldering the responsibility of your parents' career choice.
Yeah, which is why it was so strange to me.
Weird,
I was like, what's happening?
Yeah.
Well, something I'm listening to you guys both, and I was listening to you, and I actually wrote down family challenges because as a cop, like you just said, Tyler, we chose this profession, and most of us chose it because it was a noble profession and it was honorable. And, you are helping to protect your community and do all these things. For me, I also went a little bit deeper, and I don't know, Katherine, if you had an opportunity to listen to the episode that Tyler did where he interviewed me, but I got into law enforcement because there weren't many in law enforcement that looked like me. So I had like that foundation for me, but I never thought about, and now looking back at 2020, I did have a lot of people who knew me call me and say, well, why is this or what happened and this, that, and the other, but it never crossed my mind about the idea that children have to answer those questions to their peer groups now. Probably due to the fact that we have social media and everything is so out there that even our kids are seeing these very huge social things to occur, and they're having to try to, like you said, Tyler, defend it. It's just you being an adult is one thing, which I still feel like you're an adult who decided to go into fashion. Why are you defending what your dad did?
Yeah.
So it's just wild. But I want to go back a little bit because I think it's you touched on like, oh, I didn't understand that positive relationships with cops and their kids wasn't normal. I want to back up to your childhood. Like, what was it? What did it look like with your dad being in law enforcement and you being his kid from your viewpoint?
Yeah. It's funny because, again, like, this was a hard left turn. I never anticipated going down this avenue of supporting police officers in any capacity. And again, the relationship dynamics were brand new information to me. But growing up my entire life, I always compared my upbringing to Beaver Cleaver. Like, I would mock my own upbringing and call it Beaver Cleaver because it was just that pleasant. It was just that wholesome, and it really was. And I would even say, like, and this kind of goes back to what we were saying before we were recording, Mo. When I was young, like young, growing up, realizing like what life was, I was never like 100% sold on the idea of marriage. Like, sure, if it happens, that's great. If not, that's fine too. But one thing I was set on was, quotes, the way I perceived it at the time, was doing it the way my parents did it. because they were a little bit older when they got married. So I ticked that off. Like, I'm not going to get married until I'm over 30 because growing up, I saw my friends' parents getting divorced and I wanted what my parents were giving us. And then the next step was the same thing with kids. They waited until they were in their mid 30s to have kids. And I said, well, if I do get married and decide I want to have kids, it's not going to be until I'm much older and can navigate it the way my parents did, because there's some sort of magic to what they did, because whether it was their age or just who they are, I likened it to their age, and they just enjoyed parenthood, and it was evident and we could feel it. And looking back, I can see it. And that's what, I always wanted for my potential kids or my potential family. And like, again, going back to that idea of like having a wholesome upbringing, like, I'm so serious. We would go to the park. My dad specifically, we would always go to the park with both of them, but my dad specifically would take us to the park and go on treasure hunts. And we would just like find crap in the park and like take it home. Yeah. And my mom's like, and we had a box of crap that you guys called your treasures that you found on your treasure hunts. And so we would take the produce. And one time my dad had this brilliant idea. We had like a decent sized cucumber from the bunnies and we pickled it. Yeah. And like, it was a project that we all worked on. Like, he figured out how to pickle, and we would like check on the cucumber while it pickled over the course of a few days. And then when the time came, I think we ate it. But like, just silly things like that, are just so genuine and sweet and wholesome that I just feel so lucky to have been able to benefit from and look back on now.
A couple things real quick. One, Catherine, I can edit this out if you don't want to talk about it, but Mo, her husband's like a combat veteran, Purple Heart. He's like it's like a power couple, right? So she chose well. It's just like, she just kind of threw that nugget out. I was like, oh, like, I know what that is. That's that. But then I will say this also, having kids older, because like, if I imagine having kids the age I am now, I'm a very different person. Put the career stuff aside, my patience, my demeanor, my thoughts on life, my view of the world, all these things than when I was in my 20s. And so what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me, because doing that in my 20s, I was like, I didn't have time for that. I was worried about money, like whatever, career, all these things. But now I'd be like, I would love to do that. Have a treasure box full of rocks and pine cones or whatever it was that was a treasure. You appear to look at it fondly and not like hope or something like that was a positive, right? Instead of,
100%.
Oh, my dad was always stressed out and raging because whatever was going on, his career or his money. There's a lot of value in what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think one of the nuggets, too, that she just dropped out, and I think this would go across the board, but especially with law enforcement, is her parents enjoyed parenting. Yeah, I think that with the trauma of what people do in law enforcement, a lot of times they miss the enjoyment of parenting, because we do get hung up a lot of times on the bad things that we see happen. I do think that enjoying parenting does come when you do have kids later in life, because your perspective changes. But I think that no matter what age, if you can find the joy in parenting, that you're going to rear kids that are going to feel that, like you just said, that is huge nugget, huge for people to understand, that for your kids to feel that you enjoyed having them around is so important. Because I can tell you there are people that are not cops, and I see them who are much younger, and they are more focused on doing all the things versus spending all the time and enjoying the time that they have with their kiddos. So I think that's a huge, like when you said that, I wrote it down because I was like, that's the key right there, that you felt that your parents enjoyed having you guys.
Yeah.
100%. Catherine, I have two questions follow up to what your statement. So when you were talking about growing up, my kids have described it as almost like a fishbowl. Cops talk, it's funny to hear them refer to it that way, but like they felt like they were different, or there was more attention or awareness on them because of what their dad did. Did you feel that at all?
Not really. I think one thing that is different, is the time that I grew up. I grew up in the 90s. So things were much different in the early 2000s. So things were much different in that, like, we didn't have all the exposure that we have today. But no, not really. I mean, like, we never thought about what he did for a living. It was like, we talk about like the facing the door in restaurants, like that wasn't a thing. He preferred it, but like we didn't know. He would sit wherever he would sit. Like, it wasn't really a thing. And so, no, not really. I do remember like in our immediate area where we lived and grew up, like our house was the house that people could go to if something happened. So like if there were neighborhood fights, we would get a knock on the door or a phone call, or he would be running down the street, or like if there was, God forbid, like a babysitter had an emergency, they knew that they could come to the Boyle's house because, they would know what to do. He wasn't always home, but like apparently we just kind of were that house, the first line of defense. So not so much that concept of a fishbowl, but there were like small things, I guess, that stood out, but they were always for the positive.
Yeah. And I get that's a time shift, right?
What
you're talking about. Also, I'm laughing a little bit when she says like, leave it to Beaver. Keep in mind, she's talking about Philadelphia. Nobody talks about it that way. Anyway,
No.
Not today anyway. Not today. Maybe in the 90s. Not today.
Yeah.
So I chuckled in my head a little bit about that. But maybe the time shifts because my kids, well, they didn't have that. It was either your dad's a cop and they didn't either get it, or it was like, how can you possibly even talk to him? I mean, they've had a lot of negativity. And during a lot of the riots and stuff that were going on during this time frame, they were a little concerned, and they were, because keep in mind, I wasn't a local cop anymore. I was with the Secret Service. I was gone. And so they would get concerned. Hey, there's people driving by our house. They started getting, it was like a safety thing. So
yeah.
A little different time period, but than what you're talking. I'm glad that didn't happen to you.
Yeah. And I think it was just different in general. Like my dad was in some sort of investigator position, like detective, lieutenant, sergeant. Most of my upbringing in my memory, like he wasn't a beat cop, really. Like I wasn't alive in those years. So I think that's a little different too. And like he had a specialized unit. He worked in special victims unit for the most part. So like he had a specialized unit. So he's not like necessarily arresting like Joe, the neighbor's girlfriend or like whatever.
Or something dumb.
Yeah. So I think that there's like a little bit of nuance there too, but 100% like the climate of policing and the exposure that kids get, I think is a huge piece of the puzzle too.
Yeah. Do you realize how badass your dad is to be a special victims investigator in Philly? Like so I know a lot of Philly cops, or at least I should say I've met them. I know what that kind of takes and what he probably did to get there, especially walking a beat in Philly. Your dad's badass. I don't know if you know that as his daughter, but like that's a bad dude.
I think he's pretty cool.
Oh my God. I love it. Sorry.
I just have one more, I just want to get an understanding with your childhood, because one of the things you said is you led kind of a sheltered life. Did your parents shelter you from knowing what it was, the details of what your dad was doing? Or when you said shelter, just in the respect of just some clarity on that. When you said shelter, did you know, like, was your dad being called out in the middle of the night? Were you ever concerned about safety or anything like that? Or is that where the sheltering occurred?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly like what or how they navigated some of those things. He would work nights. His schedule would change all the time. Like there were things that he would miss. I mean, he would miss like dance recitals or what have you. And my aunts would come kind of in his place. So like there was always like a if this, then that kind of a situation. Yeah. Or like for a period of time when he was on nights, we would go and hang out with my one aunt. We would go to her house and like we would watch TV and play in their basement and stuff. So it was like, yes, those things were happening, but we weren't afraid. So no, I don't think that we were really explained or told what was going on. I shouldn't say I wasn't afraid, but I also wasn't like, oh my God, what's going on? Why is dad not here? Because there was always like plan in place. Like, hey, how cool is this? We're going on a little field trip at 8:00 at night to hang out with, Aunt Nettie. And like, it was kind of like a all hands on deck situation in those times.
That's awesome.
And I remember kind of coming to understand when I kind of came to understand what he did was when I was in 8th grade and he was working a kidnapping case. And I think personally, the reason is, well, it's a few reasons. One, it was super high profile, so they could not have hid it from us if they tried. Right. But 2, it wasn't what he typically dealt with. It was a kidnapping case. So it was crimes against children, which is the section that he handled. It was crimes against children, but it wasn't the crimes against children that you think of when you think of crimes against children. So it was something that they could kind of have more of an open dialogue It was
Got it.
something that like we could ask for updates or like inquire. And that's when I kind of came to understand what it was that he did for a living.
So it doesn't sound to me that you were sheltered in respect. It sounded like they really were open with information, and that put you in a place of comfort because you kind of did know what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And the second part was they had a plan for this was what's going to happen when these things occurred. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think this is something that I think about a lot because it's like you want to protect your kids. You don't necessarily want them to know certain things. And like with a job like law enforcement, that's kind of tough to navigate. But like we kind of just, dad's at work. Dad has a job where he works weird hours or he has to go in or work overtime or like, work 24 hours sometimes. But there was never like a sound of the alarm kind of a vibe. It was just like, dad's at work.
That's very interesting. When I was instructing pretty regularly at the academy, one of the things that we did for our cadets was we created a resiliency program. And that was one of the things that we discussed with them from the very beginning, that you're going to miss recitals, you're going to miss baseball games, you're going to miss these things. Create a plan so that your children know that you want to make sure that they're supported. And that was one of the things that we said, have somebody be there to videotape it, have someone who can call you with updates so that when you get home and you're back in contact with your kid, you can say, hey, I know you got that home run or those kind of things. So to hear it in action, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Well, your parents were doing that without having a resiliency course, and they just had that in them. And not to rehash my stuff, but again, I think it comes with the age thing when your parents had children. But during that course in my career, that early part when my kids were still young, I was learning a lot and it was affecting me and I didn't realize it, but I was withdrawing into myself and they just saw dad going away, even though I was there. Your dad had already kind of maybe gone through that or whatever the reason might be. These are the things that I just like to talk about these things because all this stuff kind of has an impact. And I love your story. I got to ask one question before we get too far because I don't want to get too far away from it. Because you described in your intro that you wanted to model your life after your parents' life. Was this just an internal acknowledgement in your own head, or is it something you guys talked about, married later, having kids later? You just were like, this is what I'm doing.
It's a conclusion that I came to on my own. I remember when I was really young, I've never talked about this before, but when I was little, like I said, I saw my friends' parents getting divorced. I saw family members getting divorced. And when I was young, I literally thought that was just like a part of life. Yeah. Like everybody got divorced. And I used to be scared, like when does that moment come for my family kind of a thing. Oh, and wow. So when I kind of put those puzzle pieces together, that's not real. You don't have to get divorced. And my parents aren't getting divorced. That's when I kind of started to decide like, okay, they're onto something and I want to do things the way they did them.
Sorry, I'm going to keep doing this. Mo, check me in when I need to.
You're good right now.
You keep hitting me things. And Katherine, if you're like, nah, I'd rather not, well, I'll edit this out. But what did your mother do? Or like, how did your father and your mother meet? What was their, I guess, what was their path for that? Because you said you got married later, right?
Yeah. So they were 29 and 34 when they got married, which they're baby boomers. So that's older for their generation. And they met at an apartment complex. They were neighbors at an apartment complex. And it was long before my dad became a cop. They just kind of met and hit it off. And and that was that. Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay. Well, again, there's stereotypes everywhere. Cops marry other cops, teachers, or nurses. That's about it. Or health industry. More or less. Like that's kind of it. So they met even before he was a cop and they're still together. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because that's a life change.
Yeah, 100%.
Sorry, I had to ask that.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Mo, get us back on track.
Yes, I am. So I wanted to talk about kind of like the foundation of where you grew up, because I think one of the things that you said when I was reading in your websites, it said dad was dad first and cop second. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of what you've kind of been touching on about your rearing. But I wanted to dive into that a little bit more. What made you feel like dad was always dad first and cop second, even though he had these crazy shifts and he would have to go to work and he'd have to do all these things?
I think it comes back to what I said earlier about like dad was at work. Like he was always dad. We could always go to him if we had questions, go to him if we were scared, go to him if we wanted to go to a friend's, big, little, or otherwise. Like he was a point person for us, just the way my mom was a point person for us. And We had plenty of quality time with him. Sometimes our quality time didn't look like our friends, but like that didn't matter because he was just so present and so devoted to his family. And it was just so clear that like we never second guessed it. And when I say he was dad first and cop second, he really was able to kind of, I mean, he was an excellent cop, Tyler, like you said. Like he worked in Special Victims Unit. He was lieutenant of Special Victims Unit. He could have gone higher, but he strategically decided not to because of the family piece.
You jumped ahead. I was going to get to that, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
You know, he had an impeccable career. People still remember him. People still call him for advice. But at the end of the day, like the most important thing to him was his family.
You reach that level. That's kind of, you're going to go what they call the brass. You're going to be in the upper echelon of the department. And I remember talking to you and you're like, no, he retired as lieutenant's daughter, right? That's what we talked. And I know we hadn't talked about it. I saw it on your website. I was going to ask you about that, but to hear you say it, he made a strategic decision. He wanted to be there for his family as opposed to trying to continue to climb the ranks, which once again, that's huge. I'm sure that was actually, well, maybe it wasn't hard for him, but I know pride-wise, you know, he's like, oh, I could have probably been a colonel, or whatever the structure was, right? It ties in a little bit to Mo and Frank because they kind of did the same thing, which I love. But to hear you say it is just, it's excellent. And I think it needs to be talked about more because sometimes people get really career-driven thinking like, this is what's best for the family. I got to go as high as I can, you know, all these things. But anyway, sorry.
No, I what I loved is the verbiage, strategic decision. I think quite often that people think that, oh, well, he quit or, oh, yeah, he had to give it up. That's the verbiage you hear a lot of times. Strategic decision sounds like it's a plan. It sounds something that is absolutely, it's not a, oh, he gave up. It's not a, oh, it got taken away. This is something, it was a choice and it was based on looking at all of the pieces of the puzzle. And I think sometimes people don't look at stopping at a point as being a strategic decision. And because they forget, and you say it at one point, they forget what their legacy really is.
Yeah.
And it's not your job. I always say, even if you have an experience where you get hurt in the line of duty or God forbid get killed in the line of duty, you get lots of pomp and circumstance and then they reassign your car, they reassign your computer, they reassign all of the things that were yours because law enforcement is a business and the business has to keep going.
Yes.
So
that's the cold, hard truth.
Yes, it is.
It is. So I love that verbiage. And I think that for you to say that tells me that's the verbiage that you also heard from your father.
Yeah. Yeah. And it goes back to just about everything. How he lived his career was strategic. How he took on overtime. I mean, he was not one to take on overtime unless he needed to for a case, or he and my mom decided that he was going to take on overtime for a certain reason. We're celebrating that.
Yes, I didn't do that, but I'm leaving it in because I love it.
We are leaving that because that requires celebration.
It's so good, though. Once again, you talk about it. I have not met or talked to your dad ever, but it just sounds like the way that he structured his life, his career, and his family. These were all things that they thought about. I mean, so it makes a lot of sense, and a lot of the decisions he was able to make at that time frame when you and your sibling, you want to talk? Well, I guess we already said brother. You and your brother were growing up. He had already, he didn't have to do it where a lot of new guys, they have to because they got to be money wise or whatever the reasons might be. But he was in a position where he had already pre-planned his life, made sure he was good, had you guys, and now he's in a position where he could, or maybe not.
Yes and no. Yes.
Wait,
and
you
no.
or your brother? Which one was the unexpected?
Neither. There's three of us actually.
I'm sorry. Okay, we talk about your reckless brother, your rambunctious brother.
But actually, it's interesting you say that because when my older sister was born, my dad still was, I think, a beat cop when she was born. But their plan was that my mom was going to go back to work after my sister was born. She was going to take maternity leave and then she was going to go back to work. But she had my sister and she was like, I'm never leaving this child again.
Yeah, no.
So I'm not going back to work, by the way.
Yeah.
And so from that point forward, they had to navigate that. They had to figure out like, okay, if this is the route we're going to go down, we have to figure out how we're going to raise her on my cop income. And then when there's three of us, we have to figure out how we're going to raise all three of them and send all three of them to Catholic school on my cop income.
Oof.
And so and it wasn't easy. I mean, now when I talk to them, at the time I had no idea, which is probably why we picked up trash in the park sometimes. But like, as activities,
Yeah.
But, now when I talk to them and I pick their brains and stuff, my mom tells me like it was a struggle because he was the only one working for the most of our childhoods. And he was a cop and he didn't want to take on too much overtime if he didn't have to. And so again, going back to like being strategic, they were strategic about how they would raise us. My mom was really savvy with like clipping coupons and like 0% credit cards and like doing all these like financial things that are kind of like in vogue right now, but like were probably kind of weird or unheard of in 1990.
Yes.
And they were really ahead of their times in that sense too. But yeah, I mean, for example, my dad, I love this story. When my dad first got promoted to lieutenant, he went to like a new district or whatever, and he had his own parking spot as a lieutenant. And my dad was infamous. This might not surprise you. My dad was infamous for always driving like crappy cars. For example, again, his car, most of our childhood, was my mom's car, like when they were dating.
Yeah.
So like, yes,
That's
a paid
great.
off car is a good car.
It's a great
100%.
car.
Yeah, exactly. So he gets this new position. He gets his own parking spot, and every day he's getting a ticket on his car. And he's like, what's going on? And he takes it to the admin lady and he's like, can you like get rid of this? Like, what's going on? So finally, ticket after ticket, he goes into roll call one day and he's like, who keeps ticketing my car? And this like little young cop is like, oh my God, LT, I'm so sorry. That was me. I just thought someone else was parking in your spot because I never expected an LT to drive a hoopty.
Yes, I love it. I love it. I love it.
See,
Also,
but that young
I love hearing that from your
cop could say
parents, though.
that. Here's the thing, that young cop could say that because until you've driven a paid off car, you don't know how good it feels.
Yeah.
You don't know how
exactly.
good it feels. Don't matter what it looks like, it feels different.
Yes, it does. Also, I'm loving this because I don't know, maybe that's how I was raised, but that's how I was. I would wear my socks so there was a hole in it, but I wanted my kids, though, they're going to have new school clothes. I made sure they had everything they needed. Might not be everything they wanted, but they had everything they needed.
Right.
And I would definitely, I mean, I've driven my share of hoopties, shall we say. And I love that
Yes.
your dad's doing that as an LT. I
Love
Yes.
it.
love it. That makes me
They're
so
the best.
100%.
I just want to touch
Pickland,
back on one thing you
cucumbers
said
from
too.
rabbit poop. I love it.
That's a whole nother level. I don't know if
That's going to stick with me for a few days. I'm like, that is amazing.
You had touched on about like your dad was even strategic about when he did overtime. And I think that is so important because Tyler and I have had offline discussions about financials when it comes to cops. They are sometimes the worst. That you get them, they go into this career path young. They immediately buy the latest, greatest. For us down here in Florida, it's always, let me get the biggest truck that's cost however much money, the 4x4 with everything in it. And now they have this humongous payment they've got to make each month. Then they get the girlfriend or the boyfriend. Then they want to buy the house and they want to make sure that they all live in the same, I don't want anybody else to not live or know that I live this way. And they're not strategic with their finances. And all of a sudden they go down a path where they're in the red, they're redlining their finances. So they have to work overtime, and then they throw a kid in the mix. So, and they don't realize that now you have created a pressure cooker where you go to a job that is trauma driven for all intents and purposes. You add on that on your days off, you're constantly putting the uniform on. So you're not being able to have that time. Like you said, that you have that quality time with your kids and family. And you're stressed to the max because you got $1,000 car payment and a $5,000 mortgage, and that's not where you should be. So that's one of the things that like I said, we've talked offline, but for you to say how your family, that your mom and him would discuss, okay, how do we do this now that we have one kid? Now we have two, now we have three. Those are conversations that we really have to start having ahead of time.
I agree.
Best advice I ever got was from Sharo. He goes, create a life where you don't need overtime.
Yeah.
Because if you start living where you have to have X amount of overtime, he goes, you're not living. And that was about the extent of the financial piece, but it made a lot of sense and I understand.
It does.
But to Mo's point, we know dozens of, at this point, I know hundreds at this point that, because again, being a cop is you live a good life and you're hot shit as a single person. And it's about enough to make you hot shit as a single person. You're not hot shit once you get married, start having kids. Then you're like, damn it, how fresh is that roadkill? How long has it been
How
dead?
long has it been there?
That's a real conversation.
Maybe I will get rabbits after all.
That's a real conversation. That's a real.
It's wild because for me, I was like your dad. I was picky on my overtime. I wasn't going to work anything that had drunks. I wasn't going to work anything that required me to direct traffic. I wasn't going to work anything that required me to sit on the interstate. So that ruled out a lot for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
so I was like, well, my overtime became, I would teach in the academy. That was the only overtime I did. By the time I hit year 10, I was smart enough and I had financially got myself in a place where I didn't need it because it was stressful to have to put that uniform on. And I don't think sometimes cops realize that. And that leads me back to what we were talking about, but also when you were talking to these cops and interviewing them, and that's where you kind of had your change of heart to lead into your career now, what were they telling you that made you go, wow, this isn't normal. My rearing wasn't normal. What were they saying to you that kind of highlighted that?
Oh my gosh. I mean, some of them were retired and they were just kind of reflecting back during these conversations, like they were also having the revelation because as they put it, like talking to me made them realize like though the things she's saying about her dad are not things that my kids would say about me. Like he was there, he was present, he loved us, he put us first. And like they were, saying they don't talk to me. I had one guy come up to me after I did a speaking engagement and he said that he hasn't talked to either of his kids in he couldn't remember how long and he has like 3 grandkids and he's never seen them. And just like these
like
and a lot of times they don't know exactly what happened or what they did, but it's like I don't know where I went wrong, but like my kids won't talk to me or like I only see them on holidays. And they were also reflecting like I thought I was doing everything I was supposed to do. And a big piece of the puzzle is like they think they are providing financially, which is what they're kind of conditioned to think in a lot of cases, especially when they're men and like your old school thinking is like the man provides. And, they were like, I thought I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, but then they got old enough to cut me off and they cut me off. And like, I don't know what happened, but it was like a slow burn leading up to that. They liked that they had a roof over their head, but they didn't care that you had a fully loaded 4x4 or that or even that they like went to Disney World every year on their birthday or whatever. They would have much rather gone to the park and picked up trash with you on every weekend or every day off.
Katherine, I had a therapist tell me, describing what he was talking, like I'm providing, I'm doing all these things. He goes, yeah, that went out with the 70s, bro. Like he was very direct. I love that guy.
I love that.
He goes, that's the 70s, dad. That's not how it is anymore. And then to your point, I've also spoken to younger, not my kids' age, but younger folks whose parents were law enforcement. And you're talking about Disney World. We went to Disney World every year. He goes, it got to the point where we dreaded it because that meant we had to spend that much more time with him. I was like, oh my God, here he is thinking I'm doing this great thing. But they're like, no, we didn't want to be around him. He was awful. I was like, oh my God. And I'm sure, I don't know that he knows that or knew the dad that I'm referring to. But to your point, here he is. I can put myself in his shoes and I'm like, he's doing all these things. He's working. He's grinding. He's like, look, God damn it. We made it to Disney World every year. And they're like, yeah, we fucking hated it because we didn't want to spend that time. I was like, there's a disconnect to your point. And that's my nightmare, by the way. And anyway, it's why I made a lot of life changes, but still, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah. Wild, right?
That's just, that made my heart hurt when you say.
Yeah, that's sad. That's awful.
Yeah.
And then also, I ended up branching out to other adult children too and talking to them and get kind of the lay of the land on their experience. And their experience, obviously, it was like talking to a peer, but a lot of times, more often than not, it was very different.
Yeah.
In that they would share like, I didn't see my dad a lot growing up, or we had to walk on eggshells around my dad growing up, or we were like, we wouldn't sleep at night because we were scared that he was in danger or that he wasn't going to come home. So just like all these things that, again, I never put any thought into. And when I was exposed to them, I was like, this has got to, like, that we have to be able to navigate this better.
Katherine, you're saying these things and it's just, you got to understand, it hits me very hard personally, because those are things that I learned from my children. They didn't want to upset me when I was happy because they wanted me to be happy. They didn't want to upset me when I was angry. And so to your point, that's what happened. They started walking on eggshells. And then I think I shared with you before, but things that to me, I never even thought twice about. Coming home, changing the uniform because I had blood all over it. And they woke up, they saw it. And I was like, it's not mine. It's fine. Go back to bed. I scared the shit out of them. They're like, oh my God, what's going on out there? It's a war zone. All these little things that I didn't give it a second thought. Here I am, years later going, damn it. I tried so hard. I tried so hard. To your point.
That's okay. You did your best.
I really did, but it hits me because hearing you talk about it, it's like, God damn it. Anyway, Sorry, Mo, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I think it's super interesting as I didn't know. I knew you had talked to cops, but to hear you have talked to other adult children, that lends a lot to the perspective because, and this is stealing from Tyler, you don't know how well you've done until your kids do get into their 30s, whether you've done well or not.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
To hear you talk to the adult kids and get their perspective and hear, gosh, this is what they felt. That is a very difficult road as a parent to try to navigate now that they're adults and they do have the choice to be around you or not.
Katherine, what's the age range of the kids of cops that you've talked to? I'm just trying to see if there's the older ones maybe understood or the younger ones. I'm just trying to see if, the profession shifted and how it's viewed by the public.
Their age now?
Yeah.
Youngest was about 20, 21.
Yeah.
Oldest was like 70.
70. What was that one like? I'm interested in the 70-year-old.
That one was interesting. He was actually a firefighter. So we talked about his career too. It's actually a podcast episode of mine.
We can plug it.
And
go ahead.
I don't remember what number it is.
That's all right. Go ahead.
Listen to it all.
It was fascinating. It was heartbreaking. He really idolized his dad, but I mean, similar to, what we've been saying, like there were things that he didn't know what to expect from his dad. Mm-hmm. And then, when his dad got out of the profession, it was kind of like, well, what now? Who are you now? Because that's obviously like a whole nother leg of all of this that we're talking about is the post-retirement chapter. So yeah, that was episode. Todd Stewart is his name. And I actually think he's much younger than 70, but
older, but still he's not 20.
Older.
That's
yes.
Right. Because it's just different generation, right? And so
exactly, yeah.
One, the way cops even were back then, different than they are now. And then how they were viewed over almost every decade it shifts, I guess. That's so cool that you have that kind of broad spectrum view.
Yeah.
Digging that, yeah.
Very interesting.
Very interesting. Sorry, one more thing, and then we'll jump back on. Have you seen anything as far as the way, do you feel the shift in the way the profession of law enforcement is viewed impacts the children of law enforcement professionals? I'm more speaking to the younger ones that you've spoken to.
Yes, 100%. Especially, again, like we kind of alluded to, especially now with social media, not just at their disposal, but at their friend's disposal and at the kid who sits next to them or behind them in math classes disposal, because you could protect your kid from social media and from what social media has to say about the cops all day long. But if the kid who sits behind them at math class saw whatever reel is, in vogue right now and tells your child about it or like we talked about, challenges your child about it or brings it up, then, it's a whole can of worms. So I think, this era right now is really scary. Like I can't even imagine what it's like raising kids in this day and age of technology and social media and constant exposure. And I think that it has a really intense impact. I mean, to your point, I think you mentioned earlier, Tyler, with your kids, I was speaking to a woman who has young kids and they were young and in school during 2020. And even by the time they had gone back to school, like there was still, well, not riots or protests because it was like a grade school, but there were like banners, flags, anti-cop kind of things. Mm-hmm. And her kids actually opted to start lying about what their parents did for a living, or at least like trying not to ever broach the subject and try to hide it as best they could.
Yeah.
Because,
it's a rough spot, man.
It's a rough spot.
Yeah, that's pretty difficult.
Well, I talked to you about that because they were like, cops are all racist and all this stuff. My kids are mixed. And then it was definitely a rough spot for them. And I just remember that being a hard time not to make it all about me. It was a hard time for them, but it was hard for me to try to, I actually ended up talking to Mo while I was like, I don't know how to address this. I've never had to deal with this. It was wild.
It is rough. It's very rough. I wanted to go, you talked about, your career started in fashion, completely stark difference from where you're at now. I find that incredibly interesting that you were in New York fashion and you said, you know what, let's go do this. But I think and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like that it came from two places. One, a place of loving the people who have been doing this job, and a place of curiosity of how can we make this better. And that led me into, when I dug into your path, that you went to the New York Police Department Citizens Academy.
I did.
What was that like, and what was the inspiration for wanting to attend?
Yeah, this is actually kind of interesting. And I think this is actually where this concept of what I'm doing now started to kind of poke its head out. That was actually in 2019. So I never really gave my dad's job much thought. Like I said, it was his job. My dad had a job. Cool. But I did always have an affinity towards cops. Like they always literally symbolize someone's parent to me. And when I moved to New York, I saw them a lot more frequently because living in New York City, they're just about everywhere. And so I would see them a lot. And I would see them and I would think of that's someone's parent, that's someone's child. And I would like want to smile at them or wave at them. And it wasn't always warmly received, but I would try. And
True.
And so I remember in 2019, I started Googling, like, how can I support cops? Like, I want to do something to support cops. I don't know what it could look like. And lots of nonprofits obviously came up, like donate here, donate there, which we love. That's great. But that's not what I meant. Like, I really wanted to, I always say, I wanted to be boots on the ground supporting them. And again, this is before 2020. So I'm Googling. And amongst my Googles comes up the NYPD Citizens Police Academy. And I was like, well, this is kind of a cool opportunity to be exposed to them a little bit more, to learn more about what they do, what they go through. And plus it would just be a cool experience because their academy is like state of the art, like really, really fancy.
I'm a big fan.
Yeah, it's really cool. And like, I had to have a cop pick me up at my apartment every week and take me out there because it's like not easy to get to. Yeah, so a community officer would pick me up at my apartment and drive me to the academy, and then he would pick me up at the end and he would drive me home. And yeah, so that's kind of how I came to join the academy. It was really neat. We graduated from One Police Plaza. It was like a whole ceremony. It was a really neat experience.
Do you mind talking about a little bit what you learned? Let me just back it up. I think that's a great, I've been to it. I've seen it. I think it's a great idea. I'm sure there's other ones somewhat like it. I've never seen anything like the one in New York. I think the intention behind it, in my opinion, again, I was in and out. I didn't go through it. I just saw it and I talked to people about it. I thought it was such an amazing idea. Can you talk a little bit about what you learned or what your experience was like?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I don't know what I was expecting, but not very many people took advantage of it, which I thought was kind of interesting, especially when it's like a cop will literally pick you up and take you there if you're interested. There was a lot of like clergy members, and there was at least one, I think maybe only one person, and I found him really interesting, and I give him a lot of kudos, but he definitely had a bias towards police, and he was there, I think, because he wanted to understand police better. He did argue a lot and challenge a lot, and he got into a couple spats, if you will. But it was a lot of, I mean, in some ways it kind of reinforced what I already knew. But it was it was a very laid out curriculum. There was a day where we did like shooter drills. There was a day where we were like in the fake neighborhood. It was, I think it was a little limited in a lot of ways. I think they were having trouble finding participants, not just like people like me, but they were having trouble finding like people to come and do the trainings and stuff, which was kind of disappointing. But the trainings that we did, however, were really cool, and to get other people, other police officers' perspectives and insights into different things. And I personally think like everyone should do it. Maybe not all 12 weeks, but like a condensed version, I think could go a really long way with the perception of policing and the perception of what exactly a cop does versus the justice system. I think that could go a really long way. But yeah, it was really cool.
I'm glad you said that. Everything you said is what I was also told. They have issues on both. Again, the idea of it to me is amazing. Should be replicated in all 50 states, every major city, in my opinion. But the senior detective who I was talking to about it articulated was, one, people don't want to go. They don't care. They have their preconceived notion, and that's how it is. Nothing you're going to do is say to change it. And to your point, It's interesting to hear only one person was a little biased. He said that they've had a lot, in his perception, there was a lot of people that just wanted to argue, and a lot of training cops, whatever, whoever, were like, I don't want to deal with that shit. I deal with that shit on the street.
Yeah.
Why am I going to do it here? So I hear what you're saying. I wish there was, I love the idea. And to your point, it's state of the art. It's not some rinky dink, like they rented a conference room at a hotel. It's like,
no, it's at the academy.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
You get to kind of understand what the point was. You get to kind of understand what cops go through, what they do, how they do it, why they might do it, and how perception can change. Like the idea of it's amazing, Mo. But
as a trainer, I have been involved in some citizens academies, and I think they're phenomenal. And I say the guy or gal who has opposing views to law enforcement, I welcome you to come. Yeah. And I welcome you to come and learn, because almost invariably when they finish, all the ones, especially the ones, why didn't you shoot the guy in the hand? And then you say, I want you to shoot that person in the hand that's not moving and not shooting back at you, and they can't. Or, those conversations, I welcome those, because I feel like as law enforcement, unfortunately or fortunately, we're held to a higher standard. And so therefore, we should be open to defending the decision-making process that we have, because the teacher, the banker, even sometimes the attorneys don't walk in our shoes. And so we should be open to being able to explain what it is that we are navigating, and then putting them in those real-time situations. I loved putting them in the shoot, don't shoot scenarios, because they almost always shot people who shouldn't have been. Loved it. And I'd be like, explain that one, sir.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just to be oppositional, but it's just to give perspective. And I think the people who come in, like you, or even if you come in with a differing view, if you come in with the ability to want to hear perspective, I think that it can be definitely 100% very beneficial. I don't necessarily think I'll ever turn your ship all the way around, but I might give you a perspective to go, wait, let's just listen for a minute next time when the situations occur. So I found it very interesting when I read that in your profile. I'm thinking that if you want to support law enforcement, that's a great way to dive in and get a better perspective. And it seems like, just as I suspected, that's what you were thinking when you jumped into it.
And I'm glad that guy who picked you up wasn't some grizzled old veteran that hated his job.
No, he was really nice. I don't remember his name, but he was really nice. He was a community officer. Yeah. But when I told my dad, he was like, is he going to pick you up in a marked car? And I was like, yeah, his car. And he's like, well, make sure he doesn't ever put you in the back seat. My dad does not like the idea of me driving around in a cop car. Like, even when we were little, he did not like that idea of us driving around in a cop car. And so when I'm like, Dad, I'm 28. Like, I can handle it. Like, it's okay.
Don't matter.
I remember my kids loved my cop car, and I was like, don't you ever go in there. It's disgusting. No matter how much I clean it, I was like, never.
What? I hadn't even thought of that. I always just thought he didn't want me to be perceived as like a bad guy.
No, it's
maybe gross. That too, but like, it's gross.
It's disgusting. Absolutely not. I agree with your dad. I would have been like, I'll drive you.
My mind didn't even go to the bad guy thing. I was like, no, it's gross back there. And I actually kept a very clean car. A lot of people don't. Whatever. That's neither here nor there. Yeah, no. My head went immediately, no, it's disgusting back there. Don't go there.
I was like, I hope it's a parade car, because they don't do anything with those. That's what I thought.
It's never been touched.
Never. So we've talked a lot about the career path that you landed in. And so I want to give some time to talk about beyond the uniform. Tell us about its creation. Tell us about its purpose, because I think that is where all the things that we've been talking to has led to. And I think it's phenomenal.
Thank you. So one thing about the creation is, and going back to those conversations I was having, is I started to realize that this is very much a problem, but it's a problem that we're overlooking, that we don't recognize is there. And it goes back to what we talked about. Like, the problems aren't showing up until these people are adults or young adults, and they're making very dramatic or very serious decisions. And it could be prevented. It could be avoided. However, because kids are kids, the nature of kids is that they don't know what they don't know. They accept that the person who is meant to love them and protect them is doing just that, even though what that person is doing might not be in their best interest. So like, if a cop is drinking too much or becoming violent, the child doesn't know any different. They don't know that that's bad behavior or not right or not okay. And their spouse might be like, cut it out. You're drinking too much. Like, you're not the person that I married. but a child's not going to know any different. They're just going to take it and run with it. And then later they're going to be like, oh, now I understand why I was scared of dad all the time, while I was walking on eggshells all the time, why I hated going to Disney World with him, like whatever it is. And so a big piece of why I created it was because I want to build that awareness, and I want to kind of be that voice for those kids who don't know to speak up for themselves. And I want to sort of advocate on their behalf, because even if it's not, maybe it's not alcohol, maybe it's not violence, maybe it is as seemingly picture perfect as I've painted my childhood to be, there's still nuances to this lifestyle that other kids are not navigating or trying to figure out. And one example, there's two super simple examples that I give. One is watching your parent put a gun on their hip every day. Not normal. Not normal.
Yep. You talked about that now.
Yeah. And when you're young, it's at eye level.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so normal. And again, as adults, we can adapt. Like maybe the first few times it's like, oh, this is weird. Or like as a spouse, so I don't love that. But as a kid, it's just like, okay.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, like Susie Smith's dad hates guns and like will not let anyone who likes guns in the house, which I think we talked about, Tyler.
Yep.
And then the other one, which is one that I experienced personally, is going to court. So simple, innocent, like not a big deal. But when I was little, my dad would go to court. He would have to, show up. Yeah. And it would stand out to me because he would have a very different schedule if he was going into court. Like he'd be leaving at a different time than normal, and he'd be wearing different clothes. And so, and my parents would be like, I'd be like, what's going on? Why is dad doing this? He has court today. Cool. But in my brain, I'm like, what does that mean? All I know is from what I learn in TV and media, and bad guys go to court. So like, is my dad in trouble? Did something happen that he needs to go to court? Like it's super like no one thinks about that. Like it's so simple as a parent to be like, oh, he's got court today, no big thing. But as a kid, so much is already confusing, and so much like you're trying to make sense of so much of the world, and so much of what you end up with is from just kind of learned from TV, learned from now social media, from what's kind of around you. And so, like I said, it doesn't need to be the big dramatic things. There's still small things that can stand out and be confusing for a child. And if something is confusing for a child, it can be scary for a child.
Right.
And so again, I just hope that I can sort of build awareness and advocate on that behalf. But then the other piece of the puzzle is I want cops to understand that you can have an exceptional career. You can have a badass career, an epic career, like all of these things. You can have that, but you can also have a great family, lasting legacy through your family at the same time. In fact, I would argue that if you prioritize the family piece, the job piece will fall into place kind of by default, because if you have everything in place at home, if you have your priorities in order, if you know what you stand for as a person, as a parent, as a spouse, as a friend, child, all of these things, then you're going to be able to show up as a cop that much better and that much more even keeled and navigate not only life, but your career that much better. And I want to ensure that cops understand that all the running and gunning and focusing on climbing the ranks and getting to brass and all of these cool, badass things are not going to last if the other piece of the puzzle is not put in place.
For sure. Two things, Catherine. One, I want to just say this, and I have a question about the gun, because we had a story, and I'd love you to share that with Mo. But what I like about what you're doing, it's a non-threatening way. It's almost like, I call it therapy. We talk a lot about mental health and stuff, but a lot of it is suicide prevention and things of that regard. But it's a non-threatening way to start putting things in perspective while in the profession without having the stigma affiliated with it. We talked about it before where, cops have this stigma about going to mental health, but they don't care how many divorces they go through, whether or not they talk to their kids or how much they drink every night, as long as I don't go have to see a therapist, right? Or self-medicate, things of that nature. So to me, what you're talking about with your speaking and your training and the workbook, it's a non-threatening way to start self-reflecting a little bit. And so I wanted to put that out there. But you told a story, and it has actually stuck with me since you started talking about it, because I was like, damn, I wonder if I actually had to go talk to my kids about it. You were at a doctor's office and they were asking, are there guns in the house?
Yeah.
I don't want to tell the story for you, but Mo.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't even think about this.
Yeah. Yes. So I will say, just to your first point, yes. And that's kind of by design. Like, because the other thing too is like, it doesn't need to be that dramatic. It doesn't need to be moving mountains. Like a little bit can go a long way. And we can talk about the workbook later, but like that's something that I put thought into when creating the workbook, because like the last thing I want to do is put more on a cop's plate. Like there's enough going on.
That's why you're an author.
Yeah.
Sorry, inside thing.
And yeah, like just a little bit can go a long way, whether it's a little bit to take care of yourself or a little bit to spend more time with your kids. Like it's gonna make a big difference, and that'll start the snowball effect.
100%.
Yeah. So the doctor's office story, this is crazy, especially now looking back.
It makes total sense, but it is great. I never thought about it. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So when I was young, I don't remember how old I was, but I mean, it's like one of my earliest memories. I was at the doctor's office, and I don't know if it was like a nurse practitioner. It was not the doctor, but it was like one of the other people came in to do my paperwork. My mom was obviously in the room with me because I was a child, but she was doing my paperwork, and she's asking, like, I guess the CYS questions that they have to ask to make sure you live in like a safe home. So she's asking, like, do they feed you? Are they nice to you? Like all of these things. And she gets to the question where it's like, do your parents, or are there guns in your house? And I remember I froze. I like didn't know what to do or say, because I knew that there was, but I was like, if she's asking me this question, like maybe I shouldn't say yes. So, my mom jumps in and she's like, her dad's a cop. Of course, we have guns in the house, like what have you. And it became like a thing. It became a conversation. And the medical professional suggested that he start keeping his gun in his glove box. And
keep going.
Okay.
I know, Mo. I know. I was like, what?
And
Probably not.
and my mom, obviously, then my mom had to explain why he couldn't do that. And it became a conversation. I don't want to say it became an argument, but it became like very much a bit of a heated conversation where my mom kind of had to like educate her on like, that's not how these things work. And I don't like remember 100% like how things ended, but it was bizarre. And I mean, how often do these people deal with children of law enforcement and are putting them in these situations and not understanding? And I guess that's like the importance of having culturally competent people in these industries. But
that's
yeah,
a whole other thing.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, that's one of my first memories, and definitely my first memory where I was like, guns. People don't like guns.
Oh, what do you think about that? I've still been thinking about it. I'm like,
that's wild. Like,
yeah.
And I mean, I understand that they have a role, so I can respect that part of it. I'm not putting my gun in my glove compartment. That's crazy. But then what immediately popped in my head is you can't remember what age you were, but that was one of your earliest memories, because that probably the stress of that moment stuck with you. Mm-hmm. And again, we go back to what we said in the very beginning, the family challenges. The profession I chose has now created stress for my kids.
About something you never would have imagined.
No.
I never thought about that. About like gun safety, like all these things. And then you have this, again, I'm not knocking the medical profession, but doing their job. But you've just introduced this stress, this anxiety. Like, well, is he bad? I don't. Anyway, and then now put it in today's perception on law enforcement. Right? That conversation goes, I have no idea. Katherine, it's these little nuggets that you throw out. I'm telling you, it's sticking with me. I just saw my daughter last night, her senior night. It was a big deal. And I was bringing up things from our conversation, and she's like, nah, it's very just kind of like, no, I don't think about it. I was like, man, damn it. It's just really, it's stuck with me. Things I've never thought about. So I'd like to get into the workbook. I want to be respectful of your time, but it's just like I said, I love what you're doing, and I love what I see the value. I wish I thought about it. I don't know that I have the skill set to do it, because I'm I'm on the other side, so to speak, but you might talk about the workbook.
They wouldn't listen to you. I think they would listen because of where she's at in life. It's different.
No, it's great.
Yeah, it's definitely a different perspective.
It's 100%. And I think that's where you're hitting cops in their feels, like I always say, because now you're their child talking to them. Yeah. And it's going, I don't like how this feels. And that's the only way you can truthfully get cops to actually confront situations, is you have to get them in those places like that. So I think it's amazing. One of the things, too, that you said I think is super important, understanding that the idea in law enforcement, this is pitched all the time, and Tyler, you can back this up. Listen, when you come to work, you got to box up all the stuff that happens at home and just go to work. Never happens. That doesn't happen. You get a cop that's at work who is now stressed out because things at home aren't great. But you said earlier, if home is good, work inevitably will just fall into play. So I think that was something I didn't want to just let pass, because I think that is a mindset that is pitched to law enforcement officers quite often. And it's not true. It's not true. You cannot close up the box or say, listen, you got to put home on the back burner. It just doesn't happen. But back on track. I did a Tyler just now.
I love it.
Your workbook. You are an author. You wrote a workbook.
Yes.
And you also do trainings for law enforcement. Can you touch on those and kind of give me an idea of what those two pieces look like?
Yeah. So the training came first. So I'll talk about the training first. Like I said, I really want cops to understand that this is possible. Like, I'm not pulling this out of my backside. I'm not making it up. Like, my dad is proof. And, there are other cops out there who are proof that it is possible if you put in the work, if you are intentional, if you are strategic, if you will. And I don't always know like exactly how my parents did it. I think a lot of it is just like their temperament, who they are, how they were raised. And that's a big piece of the puzzle. But also, I think, Tyler, we talked about this. My dad was 31 when he became a cop. He became a cop because good pay, good benefits. He needed a job. He had gone to school for psychology. So he had a psych degree, and that industry went kind of by the wayside when he got into it. All of the institutions were being shut down. And so he kind of had to pivot over the course of a few years, and law enforcement made sense. So he went that route. And so he had a very different mindset and perspective, but also he had maturity. He had, people can argue whether or not an education or a 4-year degree can help or hurt or not matter, but he did have a 4-year degree. So there's just like all of these different elements at play in my upbringing and in my life and in his career. Also, he was raised with very, very strong family values.
Yeah.
And so to create the training, I kind of reverse engineered a lot of these pieces and a lot of how he navigated his career, how he raised us, how he and my mom worked in tandem to raise us. A lot of like what we talked about today. And I put together a training to actually help police officers kind of figure out how they can make it their own, how they can do their own version of what he kind of did. I would love to someday get it into academies, because I think that that's kind of the missing link. Like, we've got these 21-year-old guys and girls joining the academy. They're literal babies.
Literal.
And then, they don't have significant other. They don't have a spouse. They don't have any scope of what family could possibly look like, if they even want a family, anything. And then they have their career, they grow in like some of their most imperative years as a cop in this field. They become who they are in this field. And then 10 years down the line, they're trying to bring a spouse and then, God willing, kids into what they've established as a person into the puzzle. And it's like, I can't blame them, because that is just a recipe for disaster. So I want to someday get it into academies so that I can, even though it's not going to be on their radar, because at academy level, they're probably excited about running and gunning. But like, I want to be able to plant the seeds in their minds so that 10 years down the line, they can like access that seed somewhere in their brain where it's like, oh, what did that girl say? And so that's kind of a little bit about the trainings. Like I said, I do it for departments. And a lot of times to your point, Mo, it's like that person speaking could be my own daughter. And so it does kind of hit them in their feels and make them see things in a way that they otherwise might not have seen them. And then, like you said, Tyler, then they start asking the questions, and they start, fishing with their own kids and learning new things about, how they parented or how their kids felt about their job or whatever it is. And so, it's really, really cool to be able to do it. I absolutely love it. And the workbook, I initially wanted to, so this is the Beaver Cleaver of us, of the Boyles. We have been known, and it's so funny, Tyler, you mentioned my husband. He grew up very differently, grew up in a very, very, very different upbringing. And so him trying to find his place in the family took a little bit of time. And he talks about that openly. It was a curveball trying to figure out, like, he talks about how he would like sit at the dinner table and be like, what's going on here? Like, we're all having a meal together? Like, I don't understand.
Wait for someone to throw a punch.
Right.
Exactly, right. But so a beaver cleaver example is that we have been known to sit at the dinner table like after dinner is done and like play card games or play those little games that like kind of like cards of humanity or whatever, but like not dirty, where it's just like
Yeah.
a fun card game that like you pick each other's brains basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we've been known to do that.
The
And
beaver cleaver version of it.
I'm
Yeah,
imagining the dirty
exactly.
version at the Beaver Cleaver house.
No,
They'd be like, oh my God.
that would
No.
not go over well.
No.
My dad would not last long.
I bet he would win. Stuff he's saying. Hey, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
So I wanted to do my own version because I saw value. Like we're learning about each other in this like
Yeah.
super low barrier of entry kind of way where it's like questions that we wouldn't have thought to ask one another, but like now it's fun to answer and like who doesn't like talking about themselves. So I wanted to do something like that. Logistically, it was just kind of hard to navigate. So I pivoted and I did the workbook, which actually worked out better because now I've integrated like reflection pages and like follow-up questions and things like that. I designed it super strategically. It's 52 pages with the idea of connecting once a week, setting aside time once a week. They're not dated. They don't have a day of the week. They don't have a month. They don't have any of that. There are spots for you to put your own in because, again, the schedule can be chaotic. It can be hard to be like, all right, we're going to do this workbook every Monday at 6 p.m. or what have you. So like, it's kind of make your own schedule. And if you can't do it this week, then do it twice next week kind of a thing. But the idea is to connect 52 times a year. They can be short.
It doesn't sound like a lot, but it is.
Yeah.
I mean, for some, right? For you, where you grew up where it's like, oh, this is normal every day. I'm telling you, there would be weeks where I'm like, man, I haven't talked to my kids in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Awful. So to your point, I think it
can
again,
be hard.
Great idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep interrupting.
That's okay. And like the way it's designed is they can be as long or as short moments as you have time for, as you have capacity for. The back is kind of like choose your own adventure. So it's blank sheets. Well, there's like reflection questions, but blank lines for you to fill out. And then the back is like the choose your own adventure part where I have ideas to do, like depending on the shift the cop might be working, last minute activities to do where like, oh, I actually have today off and I didn't make plans, but I want to hang out with my kids. Or, you know, maybe we shouldn't all be in front of the TV today. Let's go do something instead. But like, again, last minute, don't take a lot of preparation. And then there's questions for parents to ask their kids and then kids to ask their parents. And the activities are really, I went back to my childhood and pulled some of the activities that they did because I wanted it to be like old school. I wanted it to be like Beaver Cleaver. I don't want it to involve the phone. I don't want it to be technology. Like if you only have capacity to spend 5 minutes on the front lawn with your kid, then that's what you can do. But like I wanted it to be super intentional, present time together. And then with the questions, I wanted to give parents the opportunity to learn more about their kids because some of the things that I heard was like, I didn't know that my kid was being bullied, or I didn't know that who my kid's best friend was. Like my wife handled that. So questions that they can kind of ask their kid to like probe, to learn more about them. And then the kid will probably just like go on all kinds of tangents because they're excited to share.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, the questions that the kids can answer, ask the parents, a lot of them are designed to start conversations that the kid might be scared to start or might not know how to start, or to genuinely learn more about the parent beyond what they do for a living. You know, like, what did you do as a kid? You know, things like that. Things that you, especially in today's technological era, things that we don't really think about anymore. Things that we don't really pay any attention to anymore. And it can be fun, I think, for the parent too, to like, yeah, let's take a trip down memory lane. Let me tell you about my best friend from when I was a child, or, you know, whatever it is. And then the final piece of kind of the idea behind the notebook or the workbook is that 10, 20, 30 years, they'll have it to look back on, and they'll be able to kind of pull it out and reflect or go through their memories. You know, you guys and I have photo albums if we ever want to take a walk down memory lane, but kids nowadays don't really have that because everything's on the phone. So I hope that this can kind of fill that void in a way where it's like, let's go look at what we did in 2025 and what came of it and what kind of conversations we had as a family.
Well, not to speak for you, put words in your mouth, but also if you're able to complete that, right, you've now created a mechanism that you can carry on. Hopefully, I'm assuming, right? That you can continue to do these things. You said something that made me laugh where kids learn about what you do outside of work, whatever. My kids were probably way older than they should be when a buddy of mine called me Tyler and they went, "Your dad, that's not your name. Why would he call you that?" Like, it didn't register. I was like, "You're way too old to just now realize I have a name besides dad." But like, they thought it was like an insult. They're like, "He shouldn't call you that." I was like,
how disrespectful.
But one other thing you said, talking about like kids don't tell you you're bullying. I didn't know this till much too late. My kids they didn't necessarily want to get dad involved because the few times that I had gotten involved, I go full dad cop mode and it's a lot. And I didn't realize it was a lot. They just needed me to be dad at the moment. Instead, I went full, like, we're going to solve this and I will bring down the entire school system and call the superintendent, which I've done these things. And so they're like, "Yeah, I don't need you to go dad mode right now. I just need you to listen to what I'm saying." And I was like,
yeah,
I didn't even realize that was your perception of me. I just thought, again, I was doing the right thing.
Yeah, you were solving the problem.
Rage. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to go all the way to the principal. I'm going to make it. They're like, "Oh my God." Sorry.
I found it interesting with your listening, both of the training and the workbook.
Yeah.
The overall, what I kept thinking in my head, the overstretching thing that stood out to me is that you're creating a connection mechanism. And many of these families are completely disconnected from one another. So by having a workbook that they're doing once a week for a year, you have created a foundation. And one of the principles that me and my husband, like with our son, he wasn't allowed to have any kind of electronic devices, anything like that until he started school. So for those first 5 years, we were always engaged. It was, sometimes I'd be like, this is exhausting. But at the same time, if you want to build a child that's going to talk to you when they're 15, you have to talk to them when they're 5. And this to me, creating this connection with your kids, that's where you find out that they're being bullied. That's when you find out the things that are going on when they feel like they can come to you and they have a space. And I think many of our parents in general, but especially our law enforcement parents, don't build the space for their kids to feel like they can come to them. And this workbook, gosh, it's, like I said, this is phenomenal because it's building that space from a structured place, but it's something that once you've established it for a year, you can keep going.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it.
It's just, to me, that's just such a phenomenal idea and so simplistic in nature with the way you describe it. But wow, that's all I can say is wow.
And again, I'll say this just through the podcast, I've realized this and it's opened my eyes to a lot of the similarities between not just law enforcement, military, fire, but also, Mo, I think dispatchers, right? Because that's a new thing for me. And I'm ashamed to say it. Dispatchers don't get a lot of thought in there, in a cop's head or whatever. If anything, sometimes they get the rage because whatever. My dad, his wife is a dispatcher. I don't know why I say it this way, but anyway, and for her, the helplessness, because you're listening to whatever's happening on the phone and you can't do anything, good or bad. Could be somebody calling in for help or a cop's out handling something. And she's kind of like stuck there and she doesn't know what's going on. It's all in her, she's just filtering it through her head. So all these things, but it affects them, right? So then they go home. Military guys, again, firefighters I've talked to a lot of firefighters and I'm like, I always like, you guys just eat all the time and slide down the pole and you get to spray water and everybody loves you, but they see some horrific shit.
Yep.
And that clickiness that cops get on zones, they get in their fire. Anyway, all these things, there's a lot of similarities. And then they take that back to their house. And so listening to you talk about it, I'm like, oh man, this guy, the people that I've talked to throughout my life, not just on the show, I'm like, I wish I would have thought about those things to your point where it needs to be talked about and it maybe in training or basic academy or whatever it is that you're going through.
Yeah. And I will say,
not that more work to your.
Well, I'll add 2 more. The jail people. People that work in the jails.
I consider them part of law enforcement.
Yeah.
Rightfully so. Yep. Understood.
And I guess this is law enforcement too, but park rangers.
Oh yeah.
People who work in the parks.
Oh,
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
I was talking to park police.
I forget who I was talking to the other day. And like the first task they have is to walk around the park and make sure there are no bodies.
Yes.
Wow.
before the
Well,
park opens. How crazy,
Didn't think about that.
right?
the big cities, New York, and I talk to a lot of those guys because they have actually a lot of authority and arrest power. Sorry, not to jump in. It's wild what they deal with,
Mhm.
and a lot of times they're alone because they're also understaffed, underfunded, all these other things.
That was
Yeah.
not one until you said it. I'm like, whoa, wait, what do you mean park rangers? Yogi
Right?
the
Yeah.
Bear's
No.
acting out, or what's
Sure.
going on?
Yeah. And like
That's wild, but it's true.
in like the mountainous ones, there's a lot of suicides.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then they have to find those bodies and murders, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Game
So, yeah.
wardens in Maine. Yeah, I
Yeah.
talked to those guys. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
dangerous as
wild.
shit. He goes, every now and again you come across someone armed. Every time we're in the woods, they're armed. I was like, bro, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
All these things. And to your point, bodies, and not always murders, but
Crazy.
just people get lost, whatever it is. Again, they're dealing with it. I'm like, damn, bro, it's just, it's just such a vast network. And again, Katherine, to your point, going all the way back to the beginning, we hate that guy. Screw him. It's like you, one, don't know what it took for him to, one, get to that point. Two, what he's got going on at home. Three, how long he's been listening to someone like you yell in his face and he hasn't pulled his gun out. You know what I mean? Imagine just all these things. And it's like a little decency, a little grace, a little understanding.
Goes a long
I
way.
see a lot of correlation between what we're doing. Just in trying to, for me, it's like get their stories out, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. And I love that you've taken it, in my opinion, to the next step where you're like, we need to train people to think about these things. And these career paths, they are noble paths. They should be respected. And I truly believe in, Mo, correct me if you think I'm crazy, people who get into to the field, do it for the right reasons. And sometimes they may or may not, due to various things, maybe choose the wrong path or it shifts their view. But in the beginning, I do believe that it's a noble profession, and if done the right way, it's incredibly important and it's very powerful. A lot of people don't understand that as well. It's a very powerful spot. To your point, 21-year-olds running around with a gun, taking people's freedom away. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. And
Yeah.
and the other piece of the training puzzle, it's not trainings, but I have had quite a few opportunities to speak to civilians to just kind of share like local chambers of commerce kind of thing, just to give them a little bit of insight into our lives. I mean, because I'm very much a civilian, so like I'm eye level with them, but also I have this kind of intimate backdoor knowledge into what they can or do experience as officers. And it's been so incredibly interesting and cool to be able to kind of open people's eyes. Like we touched on briefly, we kind of grazed over it, but I could go on tangents for days about how police officers just become the face of the entire Justice Department. And the average person does not understand how the Justice Department operates. The cop just becomes the fall guy for everything. And so it's been really incredible to kind of open people's eyes. I might not change their opinion 100%, but at least I can give them a little bit more insight into the human aspect of the person working that job. And then the other thing too is working with clinicians. A lot of clinicians get into the field out of the kindness of their heart, but I've learned that not all of them, many of them, don't have direct correlation or relation to law enforcement. So they're taking the culturally competent courses and getting certified and all of the things, but they don't necessarily know like the actual tactical, like the court thing. Like they don't know some of these little nuances about the actual lived experience.
Right.
And so I've been doing a little bit more talking to that group too. And I'm actually putting together, I haven't talked about this yet, but I'm putting together
exclusive?
literally like a facilitator workbook to go alongside my workbook, because it's become a tool that clinicians have purchased to use with their clients and their patients. But I'm going to put together a facilitator version so that they're a little bit more armed with knowledge and tools and tactical guidance that they can offer. And then the other one can be like take home with the client / patient to do with their family. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Very cool.
Absolutely. Mo, final thought?
Phenomenal. Like I said, everything that you're doing, we are, I was excited. He told me about his interview with you, but when I looked in and it dove into the Beyond the Uniform and what it is that you're doing. Like I just said, I think it's phenomenal. I think you have a perspective that people who aren't in this profession or people who are in this profession are going to trust you because you have such a unique perspective. Law enforcement officers are definitely going to listen because they feel like, oh, I'm getting an opportunity to listen to the kid that won't talk to me. So that's absolutely huge. And one of the things that I just wanted to leave with that you said earlier is, besides the fact of teaching people, regardless of the profession, finding joy in parenting, again, that's the best. That's the best. But understanding that this is a job, it's not your identity. And even if it's your career path, it's never going to be your legacy. Your family's always going to be your legacy. So recognizing, making strategic decisions instead of making decisions based on, I want, or I think I'm doing the best, making decisions with all of the puzzle pieces kind of laid out at once.
Yeah.
That idea of recognizing what's not what I need just right now, but what's going to be the long term. How am I going to make this have some longevity for me? And one of the things I think is recognizing that this job that I do, like you said earlier, my dad took this job because it had a good pension and it paid well. That's what you have to remind yourself. It has a good pension and it pays well, but at the end of the day, you're going to retire one day. You can't, nor should you do this job forever. It's just not, feasible. So thank you for sharing your perspective. Thank you for writing the books that you have written. And thank you for creating your platform that speaks volumes, I think, to people. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you. It's really an honor.
Katherine, anything you want to end with?
I think just really reminding anyone listening, like, it can be as simple as you're comfortable making it. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to move mountains to start connecting with your kids. It can really just come down to asking them a few extra questions, outside the box questions. Use ChatGPT if you have to. How was your day is not going to cut it. They're not going to feel like you care. If you have a child who isn't talking to you, or you're going through something with a child, like, extend the olive branch. I mean, Tyler, you've mentioned even to this day, you're reaching out to your kids and you're asking questions. I mean, you have a good relationship with your kids, but you're still learning and opening your mind. And I think that can go a really, really long way. Asking those questions, learning more about your kid's perspective can really say a lot about, how you feel and how much you care to someone. And so just kind of start. That's it.
I love it. Katherine, thank you for your time. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for your story. It's so good. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. That means a lot.